Anzac Day. A day when we remember those Australians who gave their lives for their country so that future generations can enjoy a life of freedom and democratic choice. Australian armed forces have served in many conflicts, from before Federation when troops fought in the Boer War through to World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam and Afghanistan. They have also served as peacekeepers across the globe. But the Anzac legend was born on the bloody beaches and hills of Gallipoli during World War I. In our modern times, we can only imagine the horrors those soldiers faced, unless we read history books that only describe the battles and not the soldiers' feelings. Or, if we are lucky, we can sometimes read a letter or a memoir written by a soldier who was there at Gallipoli. I would like to thank the Graham family for allowing me to read a letter written by W.A. Graham in 1937, describing only a short period of time during the Gallipoli campaign, where he served as one of the original Anzacs.
This is Gallipoli. They could have been your mates. They could have been me. You can't blame a bloke who likes adventure. He saw the posters on the wall. See the world through the sights of a rifle. Grab your mates and go to war. And give the man a bayonet. Give the man a hat. Land him on the beaches. 8,000 never came back. A rat-a-tat-tat.
He stood perhaps 5 feet 6 inches in his socks, but he was a whipcord. His face, wrinkled by the sun, was seldom known to smile. Bocky said he reminded him of a walnut with a hat on. No one in the platoon knew his age, but we all agreed he had long since turned his back on 60. This was not his first campaign either, for he had told us himself that he had faced Johnny Turk before in one of the Balkan stunts, and had helped the Japs defeat the Russians, and had boxed on in South Africa. It was during the first week on Gallipoli that we first came to appreciate Harry's worth as a soldier, always in the thick of things, with that smelly old pipe clenched firmly between solid nicotine-stained teeth. There was no gamer man between Quinn's Post and Chatham's. When I was knocked that first Saturday, the day we were hurried around to reinforce the pink-cheeked, baby-faced boys of the Royal Marine Light Infantry, it was Harry Deacon who tied me up. It was Harry too who gave me a word of advice as I made towards the beach and the dressing station. "Keep well down till you get out of here, son," he said, "and run like hell when you get over the ridge." I did. It was July when I arrived back at Anzac, after some weeks in Jezera Hospital, and I jumped from the lighter right into a crowd of the old Fourth who had come down to the beach for a swim. There was Sid Bartle, Stan Hocken, Bocky, and old Harry himself. I felt almost glad to be back. The battalion at that time was about the top of Shrapnel Gully. Our greatest enemies were the flies, vermin, and dysentery. During the first week in August, things began to hum again. Brass hats armed with periscopes moved about, gazing at long intervals into Johnson's Gully, Owens Gully, and Lone Pine. Birdwood himself was with them more than once. And as Sid Bartle remarked, blind Freddy could see there was something doing. There was. The 1st Brigade was to hop across into Lone Pine. We didn't mind. Our 3-month-old trenches were getting rather crummy, and we relished a change of domicile. Harry Deacon was like a boy with a new scooter. Our platoon officer, Dick Selden, had been in conference with other officers of the battalion for hours. In his quiet, forceful way, he imparted the details of the attack to us. It was all cut and dried. Just a matter of moving across the daisy patch in a leisurely manner at 5:30 Pip Emma on August 6, chasing away what Turks were left alive after the bombardment had finished with them, reversing and consolidating our new trenches and hanging on. Simple. Even our 6th reinforcements, who had only just arrived on Gallipoli, looked on the coming business as a picnic. The day dawned bright and warm. We were issued with those white colour patches, some 8 or 9 inches square, which were to adorn our backs and serve as distinguishing marks between friend and foe. Our platoon was on the extreme left of the brigade front and would finish up, if all went according to schedule, just on the edge of Owen's Gully. We should have some good shooting into Johnson's Jolly. The bombardment from warships and field guns, which was to pave the way for us, had started. Our officers consulted their watches. Big Jack Macy, our adjutant, moved along the line, making sure all was as it should be. And then the bombardment set in as though it meant business. Between us and the Turks, the ground spewed soil, wire and sandbags high into the air. A grand sight to us. God help those poor denizens of Lone Pine. We had fixed bayonets and were ready on the blast of the whistle to move forward from our position. Footholds were made in the wall of the trench. Equipment belts were given an extra hitch. Every man made sure he had at least 5 rounds in his magazine and one up the spout. Our officers looked more frequently at their watches. 2 minutes to go. Old Harry knocked out his pipe. 1 minute. A sudden, deathly silence. The guns had ceased. Far on the right, a whistle shrilled. Dozens of whistles. Dick Selden blew his right in my ear. Fingers gripped dirt and sandbags. Eager hands behind gave those in front a friendly lift. We were off. We didn't all get out. More than one good mate slid quietly back into that trench. Harry Deacon, Westy and Sid Bartle were running neck and neck just in front of me. I heard Bocky on my right say he hadn't got a fair start. The platoon generally was making good headway. That bombardment, however, hadn't lived up to its reputation. Those Turks had lined their parapet before we had even left ours. Bullets zipped everywhere. Men were falling singly and in groups, some writhing in agony, others lying very still. 20 yards on my right, numbers of our fellows were bunched on Jacko's overhead cover. Unable to get into the trench, many were slaughtered by the Turks, who had now left their front line for their strong posts behind it. The more fortunate of us arrived at open trenches, untenanted by the enemy, and no time was lost in getting into them. What a sight. The Turkish dead were piled feet deep. An officer sprawled across a fire step, the top of his head gouged out by a shell. We were getting it now from every point of the compass. Saps led everywhere, and into those the Turks had dashed. At a distance of sometimes less than 5 yards, it was easy shooting. Scotty McNiven had just fired at point-blank range into a retreating backbone when he himself went down. Stan Hocken was dead. There was no sign of Harry Deacon. Lieutenant Selden, Corporal Alwood and George Hayward, you'll read of these 3 in the official history, together with Sid Bartle and a few others, were cleaning up dugouts with the old jam tin bomb. Poor old Dick did some great work that day. I saw him just before he died, his eye out on his cheek, a fizzing bomb in his hand, and Bartle blowing on his Hessian rat bomb lighter to keep the sparks alive. We were jammed in like sardines in a tin. From somewhere up on the front, our advance was checked. Lieutenant Giles and Captain Milson, who with their men had become mixed with us, were killed almost together. Corporal Stone, that wild Yorkshireman, had taken charge of our little crowd. Stoney went up in our estimation that day. It was his great bombing, I consider, which eventually cleared the way for us and got us that first batch of prisoners. And what a motley crowd. They looked as though they had just come from the bowels of the earth. Blinking eyes, ragged of dress, and stark horror on every face. They expected no mercy. When they saw they were to be spared, their joy knew no bounds. They clapped their hands, went down on their knees, rose and embraced the nearest of us. We gradually worked our way to the northern end of the Pine. We had chased Abdul well down Owen's Gully. It was dark and our work commenced in earnest. We were to convert the open flank of this particular sap into a dead end and strong post, giving us a good field of fire across to Johnson's Jolly. What a night! As fast as we got the sandbags into position, Johnny with his bombs and machine guns would knock them in. But word had come from Colonel McNaughton that we would soon be reinforced. We hung on. Did men ever pray for daylight as we did? All night we toiled, sweated, flung bombs when we could get them, and fired into the darkness. And all night the Turks, moving out of their many posses, harassed us with their bombs and sprayed our parapet with rifle and machine gun fire. Nor did it stop at daybreak. Far into the morning of the 7th we fought. Albert and Bill Lynch had been wounded. Young Bill Kelly, his hands blown off by a bomb he tried to smother, had been carried out to die. When the first lull in the fighting came, somewhere around noon, those of us who were unwounded lay down among the dead and slept. Late that afternoon, when things were very quiet, we had news of Harry Deacon. Sid Bartle had seen him when looking for the body of his pal Stan Hocken. He lay with many Turks and Australians around him, and a bayonet was through his chest. So died this grand old soldier. He had fought his last fight. He had smoked his last pipe. If any reader was with us in that bloody corner, those early days of August 1915, he must forgive me if his name doesn't appear in this story. 22 years is a long stretch, and all the names don't stick. Some of that little band are still on deck. Bocky is one. I hope to meet him next Anzac Day. Bill Lynch died on the hospital ship. Sid Bartle, Stoney, and Tommy Thompson lie in France. If Westy, Alwood, and Haywood are still about, may they see many more Anzac days. Second Lieutenant W.A. Graham, born 1894. Original Anzac, D Company, 4th Battalion. Enlisted 1914. Returned July 1919. Passed away 1968.
And the old men marched slowly, all bones stiff and sore. They're tired old heroes from a forgotten war. And the young people ask, what are they marching for? And I ask myself the same question.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we shall remember them, lest we forget.